The new so-called more democratic Syria is not really being that appreciative of the minorities already, and it's doing not the nicest things in southern Syria, specifically to the Druze people. This is what we'll be talking about today. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is James Valiant, and already apologies for my bad voice. It doesn't hurt at all, and hopefully it won't sound too bad coming across. I'm trying to do my best here, but yeah, with that, James, any opening thoughts from you about the happenings in southern Syria?
Yeah, but my gosh, I'm so sorry about your voice. It doesn't put me off, and I'm glad it doesn't hurt, but gosh, do take care of your voice, young man. In any case, the Druze, for those who don't know, are a religious minority who, they're a small minority, but they're a significant minority within Syria and other places. They're a minority within Israel. They serve in the Israeli army. They're a minority in Jordan, the Kingdom of Jordan. They're an even more significant part in Lebanon, but they have long been persecuted. They themselves have been at odds with Bedouin tribes in Syria for decades, many decades now. But as a small religious minority, they of course come under persecution. Now, democracy in Syria, this is a concept that we need to open the lid on because apparently there were attacks on these poor Druze, and there have been some attacks on civilians, as I say, dating back since 20, just in the more recent past. Since 2015, there have been attacks on civilians, brutal attacks on civilian Druze. In a democracy, it doesn't mean that, there are 9 people in the room, let's say, and all 9 of them agree to beat up the tenth guy in the room, we'd have democracy, right? We'd have a super majority, a 90% majority that would say it's cool to beat up or kill or attack that small group. That would be democracy, I guess. But raw democracy can be awful. It can persecute, kill, enslave minorities. To be a viable, legitimate country does not, democracy is not a magic wand that confers legitimacy on a government. What a government needs to do is respect rights, respect the individual rights of all of its citizens, of all of its inhabitants. And the Syrian government has not currently been doing that. There have been threats from the Bedouins with whom the Druze have been at odds, as I say, for many years. And so Israel is striking back. They struck in Damascus today near the presidential palace. They struck in southern Syria to push back on the Syrian government permitting the local Bedouins from attacking the Druze minority. This is a major test of the Syrian government and its actual legitimacy. If it permits and violence against a minority, a religious minority, the Druze are a strange sort of religious minority. They're an odd syncretistic sect of Islam and other religions. So they've never really quite fit in. And while it might be convenient for the new Syrian government to not have this small minority get in the way, it is their task, if they're a legitimate government, to protect all of their own citizens. This further presents a security threat to Israel, as I say, who has a significant Druze population within it. Um, and I would further add that Mr. Trump, in lifting the sanctions and reaching his arm out to Syria, it's a test for the American government, which is trying to give the new Syrian government a chance, as Mr. Trump puts it, to prove their mettle. And I would just say, Mr. Trump, this is a serious issue and a serious test of whether the Syrian government is legitimate at all, whether the Syrian government can be trusted at all. As we know, the new leader of Syria is former Al Qaeda. And the government and the leader of that government is being sorely tested at this moment. And if it takes Israeli bombs in Damascus and southern Syria to get his attention, let me suggest that we still have a problem with Syria and might have a problem with Syria into the future. As weakened as Syria is, Israel, helped. If it wasn't for Syria, the Assad regime would not have fallen. If it wasn't for Israel, everyone who is not part of this new government or this new government suspects would be in danger. And so all we can do is hope that the Israelis have delivered the message, and a message that can protect the poor Druze minority that lives there. As I say, it poses a security threat throughout the region if the Syrians are going after the Druze, in my estimation. It is also a test of the legitimacy of the new government. And were it not for Israel, were it not for Israel, I suspect this minority would be under serious violent assault right now.
Yeah, there's many things we can go to. So first, there's the comments from Marco Rubio we can cover. There is the fact that some Druze in Israel have been trying to cross the border to basically go into Syria to sort of help other Druze people, and yet the sort of the interest Israel has in this. So basically, I think these attacks have started on I think either late Monday or I think it was late Monday where these started first, and today there has been technically announced a ceasefire. There has been announced basically an agreement where the Druze the Druze locations or sort of territories would become or sort of officially become part of Syria. Sort of the border regions would be handled by local sort of people. But the fact is that this did happen by the Syrian forces simply invading it, starting killing people, starting completely taking over. And actually, many of the Druze leaders have been calling for Israel to do more, have been saying that Israel hasn't been doing enough when it comes to protecting the Druze people. And I guess I could go with this, with sort of your first question. I don't think the Syrian government has any legitimacy. I don't think sort of just because you take over. Now, even older Syrian regime didn't have any legitimacy for that matter. So I don't think just because you take over now you suddenly have legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from upholding of individual rights. The new Syrian government. As much as they try to pledge that they haven't been doing anything close to that, anything in that regard. So yeah, I guess, do you want to talk a little bit more about this idea of a legitimate nation?
Well, you put your finger right on it. Obviously, a legitimate nation is one that respects the rights of the minority, of a minority such as the Druze in Syria. And the Syrian government has shown no indication of legitimacy, that sort of legitimacy up to this point. That's for sure. And as I say, democracy is not, even if there were an election tomorrow and the current Syrian government won an election, which, thus far we haven't seen enough peace to have even a legitimate election. It wouldn't establish legitimacy. Now, I understand that the new government is in a tenuous position. They're fighting off a variety of forces, including Turkish-supported forces in the north, and so I'm not cutting any slack to the new government. But on the other hand, as I say, this does represent a basic test that they have thus far failed. Now, you indicate that there is a ceasefire arrangement. If there weren't such a ceasefire arrangement, let's see, again, we talk about ceasefires. What's going to happen in this ceasefire? Is it going to be an outright respect of Druze rights? See, there wouldn't be a need for a Druze enclave, would there, in the south? There wouldn't be a need for that if the Syrian government were legitimate. In the United States, for example, there don't need to be enclaves of different religious or racial groups at all. A legitimate government, anyone could live anywhere and it would be perfectly okay. The Druze actually in Israel can live anywhere. They're part of they're citizens of Israel. They can be part of the political system there within Israel. That would be legitimacy. If you want to look at what legitimacy would look like in a multi-religious, multi-ethnic nation, you have no further to look than Israel itself. Nothing like that seems to be emerging from this ceasefire. And if we're going to have specific enclaves, you control this, you control that, which are still under threat from their Bedouin neighbors, threat from the government, then again, we really don't have stability in that country. And so the idea of legitimacy is being sorely tested right now. And Mr. Trump's efforts to lift the sanctions and give Syria a chance, as he says, really, in my view, would hinge upon this and should hinge upon this, among several other issues, it seems to me. Yeah, legitimacy is not conferred by simply taking over Damascus, legitimacy by military coup, but legitimacy wouldn't even be conferred if they had a majority vote. They're a like very much like Iraq, they are a multi-religious and multi-ethnic state in the region. And the oppression of minorities. And remember, as Ayn Rand said, the smallest minority is the individual. If a religious minority doesn't have the same equal rights as everyone else in the country itself is not legitimate. They accuse Israel of being an apartheid state. What is Israel? Are we going to hear anything like that if the Druze are given some kind of enclave that is still subject to discrimination within the wider country? If not, in my view, Israel should simply go in, occupy the relevant area, and protect the Druze minority. And the Druze, under Israeli rule, would be given the same rights as everyone else is in Israel. That would be legitimacy, to answer the legitimacy question.
Yeah, just to correct on one thing, the new Syrian government is not fighting the Turkish-backed forces or Turkey itself, since they've actually helped each other in sort of destroying Assad's regime, and currently are at, not sure if peace is the right word, but
Peace is the correct
definitely.
word. Well, at war with is not correct. So thank you for the correction. They are at a tenuous, they are in tenuous, let me put it this way, existing stalemate. The Turkish government itself is rather weak. The Syrian government itself is currently rather weak. And both of them can't afford to be at one another's throats, which they would, I think, be at were one or more of them in a stronger position here. So.
Well, I think currently they have the same enemies, so I think they are very much aligned. In
Notice that's what it is. It's having the same enemy that unites them insofar as they are united. And that's the way I would put it right now. So they are fighting the same. In effect, they have the enemy of my enemy is my enemy, and it will create some odd alliances. But I think that Turkey has, let me put it this way, interests that in the long run would not be consistent with the new Syrian government, although they both have reason right now to be, quote, at peace with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, moving on to something else. So, again, sort of taking what Marco Rubio has said, the Secretary of State of the US, he said, we're going to be working on that issue as we speak. I just got off the phone with the relevant parties. We're very concerned about it, and hopefully we'll have some updates later today, but we're very concerned about it. And this was specifically after the ceasefire was already agreed upon, and it was reportedly broken by the Syrian side. So, yeah, I mean, and again, what does that make of the United States, who already has talked about one, no, the Syria potentially joining the Abraham Accords, meaning normalization with Israel, Trump lifting sanctions on Syria, and basically legitimizing this regime. Again, let this regime do whatever it wants. I don't think it's in America's interest, at least I don't think so, to be involved here in any way. I think Israel might have a regional interest with destroying the weapons, potentially that could be dangerous to the Israeli regime if they fall into wrong hands. And again, even when it comes to protecting the Druze people, I don't think Israel sort of like has a moral obligation to risk the lives of their own citizens to do so. But if it chooses it, if it views it in its national interest, then it should absolutely do so. I should mention that while Druze in Israeli proper state are citizens, most of the people in Golan are just permanent
That's
residents.
true.
Now they can become citizens, but and being permanent residents affords them travel, pretty much every right besides, I think, passports and being able to vote in elections. But
It's true, but
as
there are significant Druze just in the Galilee region, for example, south of the
yeah, yeah,
Golan.
in Israel proper,
In Israel
everybody, all Druze citizens are.
precisely, and that is an important distinction. And what the world would say is Israel's occupation of the Golan Heights, for example, that territory, in my view, should expand if necessary for Israeli security. The point you bring up about direct interest is critical. I would have to say that Israel has no duty to protect any religious minority any more than America has a duty to protect the religious minorities being oppressed in some other country. However, it does imply security interests first on the part of Israel. If Syria, for example, should take over, oppress, wipe out, disperse the Druze population in the south, then they would be easily able to move in and pose a threat. Now, at this point, I don't think, as you point out, that justifies Israel having boots on the ground, as we might say in Syria, but it does if Syria continues to be an aggressive threat to a population that is near to Israel's own border, an area where Israel is currently in control, then that would and does pose a security threat to them. The United States, on the other hand, again, you're right. We reject altruism here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. There is no duty on the part of someone else to spend their lives, their blood, in even protecting a religious minority. On the other hand, the oppression of religious minorities by a dictatorship tells you something about that dictatorship. And a dictatorship that is willing to oppress its own people, such as in Iran, for example, that tells you something about the government itself. A dictatorship does not have legitimacy. And if they're willing to do violence like this, and if they're willing to consolidate if they're able to consolidate their authority in an oppressive way, then they can pose, as all dictatorships ultimately do, a threat of war. When and if they do become an aggressive threat to their neighbors, and this, you see, you can't really, the issue that I would say is that you can't really separate these issues. You know, we talk about the oppression of the Iranian people, for example. That the oppression of the Iranian people cannot be disconnected from the nature of the government, from the nature of the government. And similarly, here in Syria, the oppression of the Druze people cannot be separated from the new government that's being attempted to be set up in Damascus. So while there is no altruistic duty on the part of Israel to do anything, to the extent that it poses a potential security threat, both by the nature of the government itself and the ability of the Syrian government to come into these southern areas, it does pose a security threat to Israel. But it's in the nature of dictatorships. Dictatorship. I'm going to recommend one more time an article by Ayn Rand called "The Roots of War" that you can find in Capitalism: The Unknown Ideal. It is dictatorships that have been the cause of war in the modern world. It is the comparatively more authoritarian countries, when they run out of domestic victims, that will cause war and aggression with their neighbors. That has been the history of warfare for centuries now. And so, in that sense, America ought to be concerned. We ought to be concerned with the Uyghurs in China. We ought to be concerned with the oppression of women in Iran. We ought to be concerned with the oppression of the Druze in Syria. Now, we have no duty to put boots on the ground simply for that sake. But it does, as I say, tell you something about the nature of the regime. If the regime is willing to kill or oppress members of their own country, then they are certainly willing to be a security threat to their neighbors. The two cannot be disconnected, as I say. And that is the point that I would emphasize here. For Israel, it is a much more direct threat than to America. But why is America, and this is the point, while we have no duty to put boots on the ground to protect oppressed minorities, we should never legitimize governments which oppress such people. When we begin down that road, then we have started down the road toward a dictatorship becoming more and more confident in its ability to be an aggressor. When we ignore the rights of the government, say a government like Syria, ignoring the rights of this minority, then what we're doing is we're legitimizing, we're assisting, we're sanctioning that oppression. If we lift sanctions on Syria, then we better be confident that they're not going to be an oppressive authoritarian regime. Otherwise, we are in effect sanctioning that oppression. America should never be in the position where it does that. So I'm somewhat gratified at Rubio's comments, but a ceasefire, again, back to the original point, like with any other aspect which causes the temporary stability and peace in Syria, we have to look at it just in those terms. We have to look at what Syria's real, the new government of Syria, its real motives, real ideology consists of. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up for yet another aggressive dictatorship that will build up over time in that region. So, and we can never, ever, ever sanction dictatorship or sanction an oppressive regime. To do so is to, in effect, assist in the oppression of the Druze. To say, well, we're just going to lift sanctions, we're going to normalize relationships, welcome to the Abraham Accords, no problem. If you say out loud, okay, we respect Israel's right to exist, that ain't going to cut it. It's simply not going to cut it. Insofar as you are an oppressive dictatorship, you are not legitimate. We will not help you or sanction your oppression of that group of people. That is always and forever in the interest of a legitimate government. The West, in its pragmatic, realpolitik approach to working with, dealing with, negotiating with, trading with dictatorships, is committing suicide. It's a suicide on the installment plan, but we are creating our own enemies in the long run. And that's what America does. That's what the West does. We, in the long run, set up and create our own enemies 10 years hence, 15 years hence, and all in the name of, well, giving Syria a chance. No, it is a test of America. It is a test for the new government. That's what I mean in that sense. Syria had better come to terms with the fact that it cannot be an oppressive dictatorship and still expect normal relations and trade with America.
Now, before we move on, let me remind people about the Irreplaceable Spark Conference, but without me telling you about it, I think we should hear from one of the speakers who's going to be at the conference and him telling you something about it. Let's listen.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Honig from CapitalistPig.com and the Fox Business Network, inviting you to join me for the Irreplaceable Spark Conference. That's October 25th through 26th in Orange County, California. We will be talking all about applying objectivism to your life, real world stuff, how to become happier, more successful, more content, and more fulfilled. I'm also excited about not just meeting a lot of objectivists and admirers of Ayn Rand, but coaching them, mentoring them as well. So check it out, the Irreplaceable Spark Conference, October 25th through 26th. I'll see you there.
So as you can see, objectivism.co.uk, visit the website to find out more about this conference coming later this year, October 25th, 26th. We have a super chat from Bonnie, but first let me thank the super chat from Yair. Thank you so much. He actually recommended this topic. He sent me a message on Facebook earlier today, so thank you for that and thank you for your support. And also a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. She's asking, why did Ahmed al-Sharaa want to attack Druze? So there is something about dictatorships, something about authoritarian figures. It's called irrationality, and it cannot really be explained sort of logically. But what we can say is what we know about the Druze communities and sort of the current situation is the fact that the new Syrian government is like, as we call it government, or even Syria, it's not actually controlling almost any part of actual Syria, and one of those parts is sort of the southern part, not on border with Israel, a little bit to the east where the Druze communities are. So as he wants to build this new state, he needs complete control over everything. So the main justification is simply power. James, any thoughts on this or any other last thoughts, and where can people find you?
Oh yeah, what they're doing is they're appeasing the religious fanatics within their own country. It's the existence of bigoted religious fanatics in their country, and as you point out, they're attempting right now to have an unstable peace with a variety of people that they might otherwise be at odds with at the moment. And so the poor Druze happen to be for political purpose. I think there is a political dimension to this as well. That is to say, the Syrians are trying to appease their own the Syrian government in Damascus, and government in quotes, as you properly point out. They're trying to appease a certain segment of religious fanatics who are bigots against the Druze within their community, because right now, trying to maintain peace at various sides, they have precious few opportunities to prove that they're at the same level of religious bigotry that a large segment of their own population is. So at root, it's religious bigotry, Bonnie, but also there's the political aspect of they're running out of victims to demonstrate their solidarity with those religious bigots to consolidate their control over Syria, is the way I would put it. Yes, and that'll be my final thought on this topic. That's why the oppression of religious minorities is always significant, anywhere in the world, and why it always undermines legitimacy, and why it, in general, bodes a security threat to other countries, and why America cannot sanction and support that kind of government. That kind of, the liberal trope that says, no justice, no peace. There's something to that. Not in the altruistic collectivist way that you'll hear from the left, but in a far more direct way. Their willingness to do this tells you something about the government. And besides, we shouldn't be any part of sanctioning that kind of oppression. I'm James Stevens Valiant at Facebook, where I answer questions almost every day. Hit me up there.
And with that, we have the reality show coming up in just about a few minutes or so, where we'll be discussing the recent interview between Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes. So make sure to join us for that. It will definitely be something. So make sure to join us for that. Link is in the chat. We'll see you there in just a few minutes. Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.
Take care of that voice. Bye-bye.